Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Sharon. There's a part of me that wants to say, like they said, and then sit down, but I know that's not what I'm supposed to do. So what I want to do instead is talk about the things you both sparked as I was thinking about where I sit as the academic dean at this school. And as I think about my colleagues across theological education and some of the things that I hear them working with and struggling through, and then we'll open it up. Okay. One of the most instructive moments for me happened about this time last year when I was at one of my alma maters, Garrett Evangelical Seminary, to do the commencement address. And there was a dinner that is traditional. The 50-year class comes back. And there's a special dinner for them, and whoever feels so led is allowed to get up, and they're supposed to keep it at 5 minutes. You know about how much that works if somebody's been in ministry for 50 years. And one of the men got up and said, the most important thing he learned was after he left, which was in seminary, you should not be trained for ministry. For him, that happened as he went about the work of doing ministry. But in seminary, what he got was being taught in preparation for ministry. And I sat there and I thought, well, if we could run him around to all the seminaries, that would be very helpful. As students want to know, often they want training when they're in a seminary context. And for me, I think it doesn't need to be an either or, two lines running where you do one in one place and the other in the other. But how do we bring these together? How do we bring these together in a coherent way so that they both complement each other rather than confuse each other in the life of a student? As that student is going to then leave this place and hopefully not commit ministry, but be in ministry with others. So how then do we bring together skills and theory, practice and thinking, belief and unbelief, faith and intellect? And one of the ways that I think we do that is to pay attention to the typology Jim laid out for us, the FFBB model. I like that. Funding, fighting, belonging, believing. And I want to pick up on a couple of those and begin with the fighting model. The things we fight about, moral behavior issues, moral and behavior issues, finances, worship style, leadership and decision making, as Jim pointed out, have to do with identity. But I want to push that a little bit more to say not only identity, but identity and tradition. And these things are key when we live in chaotic times like we do today. It would be one thing if we were sort of in a peaceful era in the United States and in the world, but we're not, and we're scared, most of us, and rightly so. When we think about the threat of terror, the fact that our cities continue to decline in many areas in the country, where educational patterns are channeled along class and income and social ability and mobility lines, you know the list, it goes on and on. That's scary stuff. And we've lived with it so long that we think it's natural. And that's a problem because we forget that that causes a dis-ease amongst us. So what happens when students come to us out of that kind of climate with little sense of Christian identity and no sense of tradition? That's one group. Or no previous formation that must take place in a quick 3 years if they're in the MDiv program, and 2 years if they're in the MAR program, or 1 year if they're in the STM program, and if they're lucky they may get a third year in the MAR program. but it's a short period of time to get what you may have never had and really integrate it into yourself. A third group, when there is a history of formation, but it is now going serious transformation and questioning. And you have 3 years to do that in a high-pressure academic environment. And then a fourth group, when there is a sense of religious identity and education and tradition, and what we do here helps us to deepen and enrich that. All those folks and more sit in our classrooms in a chaotic time, trying to get some sense of a hold on the various resources we're trying to help them understand. And then they're out in the churches if they're in their intern year, or if they're doing CPE, or if they're doing leadership in public ministry in the summer, or the seminary, summer seminary intern program. And they're having to make sense out of that with people who are also going through some sort of movement around identity and traditioning as well. It's a muddled group. So not to give some thought to the diversities that go beyond color and race and gender, etc., is to run the risk of teaching in the wrong key, or worse, focusing on minutia, or even worse, failing to truly blend faith and intellect for church and world. If we are not paying attention to that in some way, as churches are struggling, and we're sending people into them sometimes who are struggling right along with them and may not know that they're in the same boat and thinking that somebody should be steering and no one has the wheel. A second thing that Jim raised for me that caught my ear: the middle way, which is the mainline Protestant church, is rapidly declining. And as I sat there listening to him, and he did begin to answer this, why do most people walk away from religious commitment? And why are these folks mostly youth? Now, I have to admit, I walked away from the church as a youth, but I did so to go to Duke. I was raised in Durham, North Carolina, to go to Duke Forest on Sunday mornings so that I could go to my favorite bluff overlooking a stream and talk to God for a hour every Sunday. Our youth may not be doing that. They may not be finding alternative spiritual resources to deal with the fact that far too many of our churches are irrelevant to the questions they have, or are asking questions giving answers without listening to the questions. How do we change that in seminary education, in divinity school education? What does it mean that in this divinity school we see the ones who have yet to walk away? We get a lot of seekers, and we get a lot of believers. And everybody is certain somebody else, let me put it another way. Everyone is certain they're the only ones that have a question about who they are in the name of the Lord. Even when we tell them they're not the only one, they think we're just giving them wolf tickets. My concern is that having that group of youth who have not walked away may make us a bit too comfortable here on the quad. What would it look like if we shaped a class or even a curriculum with an eye to those who are not interested in what we have to say, and instead begin to listen to them, as Jim suggested? Is this a closer model of Jesus' ministry than what we do? Now, not surprisingly, I don't want to go too far out on that ledge because I might not have a job, but I think it very helpful that we be aware that that ledge is out there, and ask Once again, how can we respond through the framework of faith and intellect? How long will it be? As I was listening to Jim, another question came to me. How long will it be before we fall into the miry pit of what we live by, when what we live by is a studied reflection on our navels? Navel gazing is not believing. It is an insidious narcissism that some pass off as faith. Education should be a vehicle that helps us look out and up and around. We teach in our seminaries and in this divinity school, but we don't do a good job to help our students understand the importance of teaching in our churches. So we do the act of teaching here. This is a faculty that prides itself on teaching. But do we teach our students how to teach, is my question. Christian ed classes here and just about everywhere I know of are viewed as easy, or should be. And there has been many a student who has been in my office or in the hallway who's been surprised when they are required to work in them, to think in them, to do more than projects, but to look at the dense ways in which we learn and know and begin to integrate that with faith and intellect. How do we as an institution, this place, value the teaching that must go on beyond our classrooms? And how do we make it real? So like Jim, I do not find today's state of the church depressing. I learned a good long while ago that to live and teach in despair is not the way my parents or grandparent or grandmama, really, or all the old black folks raised me to do in the life of the church. Instead, I think we are a church in transformation. And my question is, will we, in theological education, in the life of this institution, be transformed as well? We have weathered the economic downturn well in this place in comparison to other seminaries and divinity schools very well. There are dangers in such privilege. There are also tremendous possibilities as well. And so I think about a four-part model as well that doesn't roll as well as FFBB, but I think about the ways in which integrity, vision, courage, and passion can be integrated, and how can they be integrated into the work that we do here in this place. How can we use these four things to help churches, nonprofits, communities engage in the work their souls must have and also survive the real dangers of FFBB and be faithful to God's call to us for justice, kindness, humility, love? In a pluralizing world, in ecumenical and interreligious dialogue, with an informed faith in a world gone global, and a fearless gospel regardless. Thank you.